You are sitting here, and the mind will not settle. It keeps circling back to what you should have said, what you need to prepare for, what you failed to understand. There is a low hum of effort beneath everything. Even when you try to rest, the trying itself becomes another task. You have been carrying this for so long that you forget what it feels like to meet the moment without already knowing what it means. This is where Shunryu Suzuki begins. Not with answers, but with the recognition that we approach nearly everything as though we have already finished it. We open a book and we are scanning for the conclusion. We sit down to meditate and we are measuring whether we are doing it right. We meet a person and within seconds we have sorted them into a category we recognize. The mind does not want to be a beginner. It wants to be efficient, to have mastered things to move on. Suzuki called this beginner's mind, Shoshin in Japanese. But it is not a technique. It is not something you add to your practice. It is what remains when you stop adding. Imagine a cup. When it is empty, you can see the shape of it clearly. You can feel its weight. You can notice the way light falls across the glaze. But if the cup is already full, if it is packed with old tea leaves and sediment, there is no room for anything new. You can pour fresh water, but it only swirls on the surface. It does not reach the bottom. This is what the expert's mind is like. It is so full of what it already knows that it cannot take in what is actually here. You have been trained to fill the cup. School taught you to accumulate answers. Work taught you to refine your methods. Even spiritual practice can become another form of accumulation. You collect insights. You compare today's meditation to yesterday's. You build a story about the kind of person who does or does not understand these things. And all of this is the expert's mind. It is not wrong. It is just full. Take a breath now. Not a special breath, just the one that is already happening. Notice that you do not need to know how to breathe. You have been breathing since you were born, and yet each breath is still new. The body does not approach this breath with a sense of mastery. It simply receives the air. It lets the air go. There is no accumulation here, no comparison. This breath does not carry forward the identity of all the breaths that came before it. Beginner's mind is like this. It is the capacity to meet what is here without the weight of what you have decided it should be. Suzuki did not teach this as an ideal. He taught it as a fact. In reality, each moment is already new. The mind that thinks it knows is simply covering over the newness with old labels. You see a tree, and you think tree, and you stop seeing. You hear a sound, and you think noise or music, and you stop hearing. You feel restless, and you think this again, and you stop noticing what restlessness actually is when you turn toward it directly. The expert's mind is always a little tired. It has to maintain so much. It has to remember what it knows, defend what it has concluded, sort everything into the right categories. It is like walking through a forest while carrying a filing cabinet. You can do it, but you cannot move freely. You cannot stop and kneel down to see the small things growing in the moss. The beginner's mind puts the cabinet down, not because it has transcended knowledge, but because it sees that the knowledge is not the same as the forest. You might think beginner's mind is something you lost. That once, when you were younger, you had it, and now you must find your way back. But Suzuki would say it is not lost, it is here. It is underneath the expert's mind, the way silence is underneath sound. You do not have to create it. You only have to stop insisting that you already understand. Right now, wherever you are, there is the feeling of contact. Your body touching the surface beneath you. The air touching your skin. The sound of these words touching your hearing. You do not need to interpret any of this. You do not need to improve it or get it right. The contact is already complete. When you let yourself feel it without adding commentary, without deciding what it means about you or your progress, you are standing in beginner's mind. Not as a special state, just as the plain fact of meeting what is here. This is the ground Suzuki walked on, and this is the ground we will walk on now. There is something that happens the moment you decide you already know what something is. A door closes, not loudly, quietly. So quietly you might not notice it closing at all. You walk into your kitchen in the morning. You see the cup on the shelf. You have seen this cup hundreds of times, perhaps thousands. Your mind knows it instantly. Ceramic, white, a small chip on the rim from when it fell 2 years ago. You know its weight in your hand. You know the temperature of the tea it will hold. You know everything about this cup, and so you see almost nothing. This is the ordinary texture of attention. We move through our days encountering objects, people, moments that we have already met before, and we greet them with conclusions rather than presence. The cup is not new. Your partner's expression is familiar. The morning light through the window is the same as yesterday's light. And because we have already decided what these things are, we do not actually look at them. We look at the memory of them. We look at the idea of them. Shunryu Suzuki, a Zen teacher who came to America in the 1950s, spoke about this with a clarity that cuts through years of practice. He said that in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind there are few. Not because the expert has learned more, though they have, but because the expert has closed the door. They have filled their cup to the brim with what they already know. Think about what this means in the texture of a single day. You wake. You have woken 10,000 times before. Your mind does not meet this waking freshly. It arrives already dressed in the clothes of routine. You shower. You have showered 10,000 times. Your hands move through the motions while your attention is elsewhere, already planning, already judging, already comparing this morning to other mornings. By the time you sit down to eat, you have lived through the morning without truly being present for any of it. This is not laziness. This is efficiency. The mind learns patterns so that it does not have to think about everything. This is useful. But there is a cost. The cost is presence itself. The cost is the direct meeting with what is actually here. When Suzuki speaks of the beginner's mind, he is not talking about ignorance. A beginner who has never seen a cup is not in beginner's mind simply because they do not know what a cup is. Beginner's mind is something else entirely. It is the quality of openness that comes when you approach something without the burden of conclusions. It is the willingness to let what you encounter show itself to you, rather than fitting it into the shape of what you already believe it to be. A cup already full cannot receive new water. You have heard this image before, perhaps. It is old, but the truth of it does not age. When your mind arrives at an experience already full of opinions, already full of judgments, already full of the past, there is no room for what is actually present. The water of direct perception cannot enter. It simply runs off the rim. This happens not just with objects. It happens with people. You know your partner. You have known them for years. And so when they speak, you often do not hear what they are saying. You hear what you expect them to say. You respond to the person you have decided they are, not the person who is actually speaking. This is why arguments can feel so hollow. Both people are talking to ghosts. Both are pouring water onto a cup that is already full. It happens with your own experience too. You feel a sensation in your chest. You have felt anxiety before, so you decide this is anxiety. You do not actually feel what is here. You feel the label. You feel the story. You feel the memory of other times you have felt this way. The actual sensation, the actual texture of what is present, remains unmet. Suzuki taught in a way that was not dramatic. He did not push. He simply kept returning to this one thing. Look at what is in front of you, not what you think is in front of you, not what should be there. What is actually there? This is not a philosophy. It is an invitation to direct perception. And so there is something you can do, something that costs nothing and takes only a moment. Choose one familiar object, something you see regularly, a cup, a doorway, your own hand. Something you have stopped truly looking at because you know what it is. And then, for just a few minutes, approach it as if you have never seen it before, not pretending, not performing, but genuinely curious about what is actually visible when you look without the filter of conclusion. Notice the light on its surface. Notice the shadows. Notice the texture. Notice how it changes as you shift your position. Notice how your eye moves across it. Notice what you see when you are not busy knowing what it is. What becomes visible when you let the cup be new? There is something that happens to us over time. We learn to do things well. We develop skill. We know the shape of our morning, the rhythm of our work, the way our hands move through familiar tasks. This is not a problem in itself, but somewhere along the way, our expertise becomes a kind of armor. We stop meeting the moment fresh. We meet it instead through the lens of what we already know. Shunryu Suzuki, a Zen teacher who came to America in his 60s, spoke about something he called beginner's mind. Not the mind of someone who is ignorant. Not the mind of someone pretending not to know. But the mind that meets each moment without the weight of yesterday's conclusions pressing down on it. He said that in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind there are few. Think about fresh snow covering yesterday's footprints. The ground is the same ground. The snow falls on the same hillside, the same path you have walked 100 times. But for a moment, everything looks new. The familiar becomes unrecognizable. There is no track to follow because the track is hidden. You have to feel your way forward. This is what we lose when we carry our expertise like a shield. We stop feeling our way. We follow the groove we have already worn. And the groove becomes deeper, narrower. We become more efficient and less alive. Suzuki spoke of burning yourself completely, like a good bonfire. He meant that when you do something, you give yourself to it entirely. You do not hold back a part of yourself that observes, judges, compares to how you did it yesterday or last year. You do not think about the result while you are doing it. You are not protecting yourself from the rawness of the moment by retreating into what you already know. A bonfire does not worry about the shape it will make. It does not hold back some of its heat to preserve itself. It burns. It transforms. It leaves no trace of itself behind except ash and warmth that dissipates into the air. When you bring beginner's mind to something, you are willing to be changed by it, even if it is something you have done 1,000 times. Consider brushing your teeth. You have done this since childhood. Your hands know the way. Your mouth knows the rhythm. The whole thing is automatic. You could do it half asleep, and you often do. Your mind is already somewhere else, thinking about the day ahead or the conversation you had yesterday. But what if you approached this small, ordinary task as if you had never done it before? Not with confusion, not with deliberate slowness that is really just self-consciousness, but with genuine openness. with the quality of attention you would bring if you were learning something new. You would notice the weight of the toothbrush in your hand, the actual sensation of bristles against your teeth, not the remembered sensation or the expected sensation, but the one that is happening now, the taste of the toothpaste, the sound of water, the feeling of your jaw moving. You would be present to these things because you would not already know what they are supposed to feel like. This is not meditation. This is not a special practice separate from your life. This is simply meeting the familiar with the same openness you would bring to the unfamiliar. The problem with expertise is that it creates a kind of trance. You move through your day half asleep, following the grooves you have worn. Your hands do the work while your mind is somewhere else. And then you wonder why life feels thin, distant, why you cannot quite wake up. Fresh snow covers yesterday's footprints. The path is still there underneath, but you cannot see it. You have to walk as if you do not know where you are going, even though you have walked this way before. And in that walking, something shifts. You are present. You are alive. This does not require you to forget what you know. Your skill does not disappear. The knowledge you have accumulated is still there, but it becomes lighter. It no longer weighs you down. It becomes available to you without imprisoning you. There is a practice that emerges naturally from this understanding. Choose one routine task that you do today, something you have done so many times that it has become invisible to you, something your hands know by heart. It might be washing dishes, or making tea, or walking to your car, or sitting down at your desk. When you do this task, bring the quality of attention you would bring if you were doing it for the first time. Notice what is actually happening, not what you think should be happening. Feel the texture of things. Listen to the sounds. Observe the light. Do not try to do it differently. Do not try to do it better. Simply be present to it as it unfolds. You will notice that the task becomes vivid. Details emerge that you had not seen before, even though they were always there. Your hands may move more slowly, or they may move at the same pace, but with more awareness. The difference is not in the doing. The difference is in the presence you bring to the doing. This is beginner's mind. Not a special state, not something you have to achieve. Simply the willingness to meet what is in front of you without the armor of what you already know. There is something in us that is always rushing, not always moving the body, but always moving the mind forward. We finish one breath, and we are already thinking about the next. We complete one moment, and we are already leaning into the future. This happens so quietly that we do not notice it. It is like wind moving through grass. The grass bends and the wind is gone, and we think the grass simply moved on its own. Shunryu Suzuki spoke about beginner's mind, not as a state we achieve once and keep, but as something we return to again and again. He said the most important point is to own your own true practice, to make your own life pure and sincere. This is not about perfection. It is about stopping the constant motion long enough to see what is actually here. When we sit in meditation, we notice something interesting. There is the breath coming in, there is the breath going out, and there is a small gap, a pause, a space where nothing is being done. In that space, nothing is decided yet. We are not reaching for the next thing. We are not trying to make something happen. We are simply here. Most of us rush past this gap. We are so used to the momentum of doing that we cannot rest in the doing nothing. The moment the exhale ends, we are already pulling the next breath in. We are already moving to the next thought. It is like watching waves at the shore. The wave touches the sand and recedes. There is a pause where the water rests before the next wave arrives. But we never look at that pause. We are always watching the wave that is coming or the wave that just left. We miss the space between them entirely. This rushing has a quality of anxiety to it. Not always the kind that makes us tremble or sweat. Often it is so subtle that we mistake it for normal. We think this is just how the mind works. We think this is just how life is. But if we slow down enough to notice, we can feel it. There is a tightness, a small contraction, a sense that we must keep moving or something will be lost. Something will be missed. The teaching that emerges from this is simple. Your own true practice means your own true sitting. Not copying someone else's meditation. Not trying to be a good meditator. Not trying to feel peaceful or reach some state. It means sitting down and noticing what is actually happening when you sit. It means making your life sincere by paying attention to the life that is already here. When we stop rushing, when we allow ourselves to rest in the gap, something shifts. Not dramatically, not with fanfare, but gently. We begin to notice that the gap is not empty, it is full. Full of silence, full of stillness, full of a kind of aliveness that we had been moving too fast to feel. Think of the pause between waves again. That space where the water has receded and the next wave has not yet arrived. If you look at it closely, there is a quality of waiting there. But not the kind of waiting where you are anxious for the next thing. It is a waiting that is complete in itself. The shore does not worry that the wave will not return. The shore does not try to pull the wave back. It simply receives what comes and lets what leaves go. This is what Suzuki was pointing to. Not a state of blissfulness or special insight. Just this. Just the natural pause that is already there in every breath. Just the willingness to rest in it without trying to extend it or force it into something it is not. When you sit, you can practice this very simply. Sit with your spine upright and your body still. Let your attention settle on the breath, not controlling it, not making it deeper or slower, just noticing it as it is. Feel the breath come in through the nose. Feel it move down into the belly. Feel the belly expand slightly. Then feel the turning point where the inhale becomes the exhale. And then feel the breath leave. Feel the belly soften. Feel the air move back out, and then wait, not with tension, not with effort. Just notice the natural pause that comes after the exhale. This pause is already there. You do not need to create it. You do not need to make it longer. You do not need to make it deeper. It is simply there, a small pocket of silence before the next breath begins. In that pause, nothing is happening. Nothing is being accomplished. Nothing is being achieved. And that is exactly the point. That is where your own true practice lies. Not in the effort, not in the striving, but in the willingness to be here, in this small gap, without needing to be anywhere else. This is how we make our life pure and sincere, not by becoming someone different, not by fixing ourselves, but by stopping long enough to notice what is already true, by resting in the pause, by letting the gap between one moment and the next be enough. There is something in the way we live that splits the world in half. We meet each moment and almost immediately sort it. This is pleasant. This is painful. This is boring. This is worth my attention. This is something to get through. We do this so quickly, so habitually, that we rarely notice it happening. The moment arrives whole, complete, and we fracture it before we have even truly seen it. Shunryu Suzuki spoke of beginner's mind, not the mind of someone who knows nothing, but the mind that meets each thing as if for the first time, without the weight of preference already settled in, He taught that in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert mind, there are few. What he meant was this: the moment we decide what something is, we stop receiving it. We receive only our idea of it. We receive only what fits into the boxes we have already built. Think of rain falling equally on stone and soil. The rain does not decide to fall harder on one surface or softer on another. It falls as rain. The stone receives it as stone receives water. The soil receives it as soil receives water. Neither surface rejects the rain or clings to it. The rain simply meets what is there, and what is there simply receives what comes. There is no division in the falling. The division comes only in how we think about it afterward. We live most of our lives in that afterward. We are rarely in the falling itself. When you sit in a room and hear a sound, what actually happens? A vibration reaches your ear receives it, the brain registers it. But somewhere in that instant, before you have even named the sound, you have already divided it. If it is the sound of music you love, you lean into it. If it is the sound of traffic, you tense against it. If it is a neutral sound, you ignore it. You have not heard the sound. You have heard your preference about the sound. The sound itself has passed through you unnoticed. This is the fragmentation Suzuki pointed to. We do not live in experience. We live in our relationship to experience. And that relationship is almost always one of grasping or pushing away. We want more of what feels good. We want less of what feels bad. We want nothing to do with what feels neutral. So we are never actually here. We are always negotiating with what is here. The teaching that emerges from this observation is simple but difficult to hold. Each moment is the universe. Each moment is enough. Not each moment is potentially the universe if we improve it. Not each moment is enough once we have fixed what is wrong with it. But this moment, exactly as it is, contains everything. The universe is not somewhere else, waiting for you to become worthy of it. It is here. It is now. It is in the breath you are taking. It is in the sensation of your body sitting. It is in the thought that just arose and is now dissolving. It is in the sound you are hearing, whether you like that sound or not. When Suzuki taught, he did not teach this as a philosophy to believe in. He taught it as something to notice, and the noticing changes everything. There is a difference between hearing these words and feeling their truth in your own experience. The difference is the difference between knowing about water and drinking water. The water in your mouth is not a concept. It is a sensation. It is a taste. It is a temperature. It is moisture on your tongue. When you actually taste water, you do not think about what water is. You are simply receiving what water is in that moment. This is where the practice lies, not in understanding the teaching, but in meeting one moment completely. Not all moments. Not for the whole day. Just one moment. Choose it deliberately. It might be the moment when you take a sip of tea. It might be the moment when you step outside and feel air on your face. It might be the moment when you notice your hand resting on your lap. Whatever it is, choose something you will encounter today. When that moment comes, pause. Do not try to change it or improve it. Do not try to make it spiritual or meaningful. Simply receive it as it is. If you are drinking tea, notice the warmth of the cup in your hands. Notice the color. Notice the taste without labeling it as good or bad. Notice the sensation of swallowing. Notice what happens in your body. If you are feeling air on your face, notice the temperature. Notice whether it moves or is still. Notice how your skin responds. Do not try to have a special experience. Just receive what is actually happening. This is the rain falling on the stone. This is the beginner's mind meeting the moment. There is no division between the receiver and the received. There is no part of you standing back and judging whether you are doing it right. There is only the meeting, only the receiving, only what is received as it is. When you do this once, something shifts, not permanently, not forever, but in that moment, you have touched something true. You have lived in the universe for a moment instead of in your thoughts about the universe, and that moment is enough. It is complete. It contains everything you need. There is a way of moving through the world that most of us have learned so well we no longer notice we are doing it. We stand slightly apart. We observe, we evaluate. We form opinions about what we see, and those opinions become a kind of glass between ourselves and the living moment. Even when we are in the middle of something, eating, walking, speaking to someone we love, there is often a small watching place inside us, a commentator that is never quite joined to what is happening. Shunryu Suzuki, a Zen teacher who came to America in the 1950s, spoke about this with great gentleness. He did not scold. He simply pointed. When you bow, he would say, you should just bow. When you sit, you should just sit. Not bow and think about bowing. Not sit and observe yourself sitting. Just the action itself, complete and whole, without the extra layer of self-consciousness that splits attention in two. This is what he called beginner's mind. It is not na-vitige. A beginner does not stand apart from the task. A child learning to walk does not think about walking. The legs move. The body finds its balance. Thought comes later, after the direct meeting has already happened. We spend our lives trying to return to that condition, not through effort, but through a kind of releasing of the effort we have already made. Think of a tree bending in wind. The tree does not resist. It does not lean back and think, I am bending now. This is the wind. I am the tree being bent by it. The bending and the tree and the wind are not separate things observing each other. They are one movement. The tree is not standing apart, evaluating the wind's force. It simply yields and moves, and in that yielding there is no struggle, no separation. We have learned to stand apart so thoroughly that it feels like safety. If I observe my experience, I think I can control it. I can judge whether it is good or bad, keep what I like, push away what I do not. But this very act of standing apart is what creates the sense of being isolated from life itself. The more carefully we watch, the more distant we become. There is a particular quality to the moment when separation dissolves. It is not dramatic. It is not a breakthrough. It is more like a door you did not know was there suddenly opening, and you realize you could have walked through it at any time. When you are truly bowing, not performing a bow, not thinking about the meaning of bowing, but simply bowing. There is no one doing the bowing and something being bowed to. The gesture itself is whole. It is a meeting without distance. This happens in small, ordinary moments if we let it. When you drink water, the thirst and the water, and the drinking can be one thing instead of three. When you listen to someone speak, you can actually listen instead of listening, while also forming your response. These are not special states. They are the normal condition of life when we are not busy fragmenting it with our constant evaluation. The habit of separation runs very deep. We have built our sense of self on it. We believe that the thinking part, the observing part, is who we are. To let that go, even for a moment, can feel like losing ground. And yet in those moments when we do let it go, there is a kind of rest that is not available to the constantly watching self. The body knows this. The breath knows this. Suzuki's teaching was not about becoming someone different. It was about noticing what we are already doing and very gently, not doing it. Not through force. Not through discipline that becomes another form of standing apart, but through the simple act of giving full attention to what is already here. When you bow, you should just bow. This is not an instruction to improve yourself. It is an observation of what happens when the separation dissolves. The bow becomes a complete action. It has dignity and wholeness, not because you are trying to make it that way, but because nothing is standing between you and the gesture itself. There is an invitation here, quiet and without pressure. Today, find something ordinary to bow to, not in a formal way, not as a spiritual practice that you are performing. Simply find a moment, perhaps before a meal, perhaps to a plant or a place in your home that holds meaning, and let yourself bow, not thinking about the bow, not observing yourself bowing. Just the simple gesture of meeting something without the usual distance. Feel what happens when the commentary quiets. When the small watching place inside steps back. When you are just there, bowing, and the world is just there, receiving the bow. There is no separation to maintain. There is nothing to protect or prove. There is only the meeting itself, and in that meeting, the strange and quiet relief of coming home. We have spent this time together, turning the idea of beginner's mind over in the light. We have looked at it from different angles, traced its implications through daily life, through difficulty, through the ways we meet ourselves and others. And now we can let all of that settle. Beginner's mind is not something you achieve and then hold on to. It is not a state you perfect. It is simply what remains when you stop insisting that this moment should be something other than what it is. When you stop carrying forward the weight of how things went before. When you release the need to know what comes next. Suzuki Roshi taught by being what he taught. People who sat with him often said they felt something shift in the room, not because he was performing wisdom, but because he was simply present. He would adjust a cushion, ring a bell, sit still, and in that simplicity something became clear. The path is not elsewhere, it is here, in the care you bring to small things. In the breath you are breathing right now, you do not need to become someone new to practice beginner's mind. You do not need to erase your experience or pretend you know nothing. What you are letting go of is narrower than that. You are letting go of the conclusion, the fixed idea, the story that says this is how it always goes, this is who I am, this is what this means. When you meet the breath with beginner's mind, you are not trying to breathe better. You are simply noticing that breath is happening, that it moves in and out without your management, that it is always a little different. The body receives the air, and the body releases it. You do not have to improve this. You only have to notice it. When you meet a thought with beginner's mind, you are not trying to stop thinking. You are noticing that a thought has appeared. It has a texture, a mood, a pull, and then it fades. Another one comes. You do not have to solve them or obey them. You only have to see them as what they are, events in awareness, not commands. When you meet a feeling with beginner's mind, you are not trying to fix it or justify it. You are noticing where it lives in the body. Tightness in the chest, heat in the face, a sinking in the belly. The feeling is not wrong. It is not a problem to solve. It is something happening, and you are present for it. This is what it means to return to direct experience. Not the story about the experience, not the judgment, not the plan for what to do about it. Just the experience itself, as it is, in this moment. Suzuki Roshi also said that in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind there are few. This is not about rejecting skill or knowledge. It is about staying open. When you think you know exactly how something will go, you stop paying attention. You stop noticing what is actually here. Beginner's mind keeps you awake to the moment as it unfolds, not as you predicted it would. And this does not require effort in the way we usually think of effort. It is more like relaxing a grip. You have been holding tightly to a version of things, and now you let your hand open. What is here can be here. What arises can arise. You do not have to make it into something else. So now, as we come to the end of this exploration, let the words fall away. Let the ideas rest. Come back to the body, sitting or lying down. Wherever you are, feel the surface beneath you. Notice the weight of your body being held. Notice the breath moving in the chest, in the belly, soft and steady. You do not need to carry these teachings forward like a burden. They are not rules to follow. They are simply a reminder that you can meet this moment freshly. You can begin again, not because you failed before, but because each moment is a beginning. The breath comes in. The breath goes out. The body is here. Awareness is here. That is enough. If you would like to continue sitting with these reflections, there are other teachings waiting quietly in this collection. But there is no hurry. You can simply rest here, in the simplicity of breathing, in the openness of not knowing what comes next. Beginner's mind is already here. It has always been here. You only have to stop and notice.